thought process behind talking about three edges is Frank Clark being the only returning starter listed at defensive end on the roster. I mean, there's still a chance Melvin Ingram could be brought back, but that seems to be escaping the Chiefs as the days go by, leading towards the draft. It just seems like it's not something that they want to do. And they have serviceable backups, but I don't think any of the guys on the roster listed at DN right now should start across from Frank Clark on the other side of Frank Clark. And losing Alex Okafor, Emmanuel Ogba a couple of years ago, there just has been a lacking need for pass rush and versatility at that end spot. Because, I mean, the Taco Charlton thing didn't really work out. And this is a class that is deep enough at edge where you can get a guy in day 2 or day 3 that can make an impact. And granted, the Chiefs don't necessarily draft the best at defensive end, and they kind of choose more to take guys at value positions and as role players, as specialists maybe, or guys that are really raw, and they try and develop them, and that's kind of their path. But there's a lot of proven guys with a lot of proven next level, elite level traits that they can take on day 1, 2, or 3. And you don't have to get a guy that can do everything. You can get a guy that's really good at run defense, like they did Mike Dana in the 5th round a couple of years ago. Or, you can draft a guy that's just a pass rush specialist, kind of like what the Raiders did with Max Crosby. They saw him. I mean, he was a good run defender for Eastern Michigan standards and for MAC standards, but he wasn't a Power 5 guy, but he could get after the quarterback like nobody's business. So there's guys like that in this class, and the Chiefs desperately need help at defensive end. Desperately.
Yeah, it's one of those things where if Mike Dana's starting off the year as their top defensive end, or I guess top outside of Frank Clark, it's not going to be pretty. Or like if Joshua Kano is their top defensive end, it'd be great, meaning that maybe Josh Kano had a breakthrough, but like I personally am expecting nothing from that guy. Like it's nothing against him, but he was a late round pick who was redshirted all year. You can't bank on those guys to do anything. Now, if he breaks out and defies the odds, it's one of those positions. Go ahead.
If they draft an edge and then Kano wins camp, then that's something that we can talk about. But him being the guy right now is not an option. It simply just cannot happen.
Yeah,
it can't happen.
If you default to Mike Dana or Josh
Love Mike Dana.
Yeah, I like Mike Dana too. He's a good guy and he's a good player. Well, he's a decent player, but he's a role guy. He's a run defender first and a guy that 1 out of every 20 times or 1 out of every 15 times can give you something against the pass. Like the Chiefs can't afford to do that opposite Frank Clark. And it's not like if they address it with a stopgap, like Melvin Ingram this season, that problem isn't going to come up next year. It's going to get even worse if they go stopgap because Frank Clark won't be on the team and they're going to need 2 defensive ends instead of 1. So they have the draft capital, 2 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks, 2 third-round picks to make this happen and to make those picks happen and bring them aboard. The KCSN guys talk about it all the time, and they've talked about it for years. There's one position where the athletic drop-off is just extreme and you need to get that high quality athlete in an early pick. It's defensive end. Like wide receiver is important, cornerback's important, but the longer you wait, the less likely it is that a good player is going to emerge from that group. You can get a solid one, and we'll talk about a couple guys who could be solid, I think. But man, they got to nail that pick early, possibly even often. Are you in the camp where they need to draft 2 defensive ends at different points in the draft? Do you think they should trade up for one? What do you think in terms of draft philosophy the Chiefs should do?
I think 2 is something that should be on the front of their minds, drafting 2 defensive ends. And that doesn't mean 1 with 30 and then 1 with 62. That kind of seems silly to me, kind of like what the Falcons did a few years ago when they traded up to 14 to draft Lindstrom and then traded back up at the end of the first round to draft McGarry. And neither of those picks really worked out very well. But I feel like getting maybe like a solid guy, maybe they don't take 1 in the first round, right? And they take Pascal in round 2 or, something like that. And then they go and with one of their 4th round picks, or they trade back up into the 5th round and snag Enigbari. Now you've got 2 guys. They could potentially battle for that second. You can have them go against each other or battle with Frank Clark or Mike Dana for that other defensive end spot. Or you just pretty much say, this guy's going to be our next defensive end, and you trade up for Jermaine Johnson, but then you use your end draft capital to get another guy. I think getting two is important because there's a lot of guys on the roster right now who probably won't make the roster when the final cuts come around, and you want to be able to have some versatility in that group, because not to say that the guys are bad, but it's kind of a lot of the same people at that defensive end spot.